Welcome to today's webinar, sponsored by OnApproach and the CU App Store. My name is Pete Kiers, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm Partner Manager for OnApproach, a QSO focused on data and analytics. Through its M360 Enterprise Data Warehouse solution, OnApproach provides credit unions with the means to transform their data into actions that benefit members. We've also launched the CU App Store. The CU App Store is the global marketplace for applications that help turn OnApproach M360 data into reports and analytics to provide valuable insights for credit unions. With applications developed by both credit unions and vendors, the CU App Store provides the industry with a place to build and share analytic applications. Check out the CU App Store at www.cuappstore.com. Our topic today is humanizing data for survival. Growing the member base and deepening relationships with existing members are high priorities for credit unions. Yet traditional means for accomplishing these goals seem outdated. With the explosion of data, it seems like there should be ample opportunities to know more about member behavior and influence them to deepen their relationship with the credit union. But how? Our presenter today will provide some innovative answers to that question. Brian Ley, founder and CEO of Alpharank, has had a lifelong interest in human networks, which led him to start the company in 2011. He is a graduate of Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Brian is also a founding member of the Dyslexic Entrepreneur Network. There will be a question and answer at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to ask questions via chat or questions function during the session, and I will read those during the Q&A. So at this point, Brian, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. This is the voice and face, if you can see me, of Brian Ley. I'm excited to get into it today, but let me first start you off with a story, and then you'll see my face at the end when it's time to take more questions. So I'm going to bring you back to 2007. 2007 in London, the UK. And there was a bank there called Northern Rock Bank, and it is a recent case study in what a modern bank run looks like. So in September of 2007, Northern Rock closed its door just for one day and had to ask the Bank of England to cover its deposits. But some of its customers saw this and started showing up at the bank to check in to see what was going on because they were personally a little bit worried and they wanted to make sure that their money was safe. This seemingly rational behavior to check in quickly escalated when more people saw other people they knew lined up outside of the bank that they were a customer of. And so subsequently, the entire bank collapsed. Millions of dollars were pulled out. It massively affected the surrounding community and investment area. And many people consider the Northern Rock bank run in 2007 the first domino that triggered the 2008 global banking crisis. So how did this get so out of hand, and what can we learn about it? Well, there's a field of science called social network analysis, sometimes also called social graph analysis, which is the study of human networks. Think of every dot you see on the screen as a person, and the lines are how they are connected, and the arrows show how information is spreading. So a few people got worried, and then they told other people, and this quickly got out of hand. So social networks have been used for a long time by governments and regulatory organizations and health organizations to predict how things like viruses spread through human networks. And I'm going to just really quickly give you a one-on-one of what do we mean when we're talking about social graphs and some terminology, because it's going to come in handy later. So the first thing is connection. So connection is when two people, often represented by dots, are connected to each other. Pretty easy. These can be friends, family, coworkers. The second thing is contagion. Contagion is the word we use to describe how things spread from one person to another. Now, all sorts of things are contagious through social networks. Obviously, bacteria, viruses, but also money, financial well-being, violence travels through social networks, crime travels through social networks, fashions, and obviously worry, happiness, and even obesity. And it's interesting to note that contagion can happen up to 3 degrees away from you. So if you have a friend who has a close loved one who recently died, you are going to be a little bit more somber, according to social network theory. So there's some really spooky effects. But what I want to focus on today is the third term I'm going to introduce. It's called homophily. Homophily is a complicated word. You don't need to remember it. You can think of it, though, as birds of a feather flock together. So there's this really interesting component of social networks where people tend to hang out with other people that look like them, act like them, share similar beliefs. And we can use this to supercharge how you're going about and acquiring deposits, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So a bit of background on me, I'm a huge nerd when it comes to relationships. So personal relationships, professional relationships, and customer relationships. I'm also an expert in the area I just quickly introduced to you of graph analytics. And so graph analytics is kind of the secret sauce of what we do about Alpharank and how we're able to get the results I'm about to show you in a little bit. Now, at this point in the webinar, you might say, Brian, well, this is really interesting, and I understand, the importance of something as serious as a bank run, but I don't yet get how my particular organization and credit union can benefit from social networks. I mean, we're not Facebook or LinkedIn. We don't have this sort of data, right? Well, you would be wrong. And so here's the big idea in a few words. So you know how sites like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn have been collecting information on how people are connected to each other? I'm imagining some head nods here. It typically looks like a bunch of dots and lines connected to each other. So hold that idea in your head. Now, at the same time, you know how every time one of your members uses a debit or credit card, it generates that time-stamped transaction string? Person A went here at this time, spent this much money, right? Good crowd. So the big idea is that while that transaction data, while that card swipe data is very simple in isolation, if you get enough of it together and you look at it in a special way, you can actually turn that transaction data into customer graph data, giving you the same sort of data advantage that a Facebook or a LinkedIn has, using only anonymous member transaction data. Pretty cool, right? So the reason that this matters, and the reason figuring out new ways to use your data has never been more important, is that the competitive environment that you swim in as a credit union has gotten increasingly crowded. So on one side, you have the fintech challengers. Now, these are the new entrants to the market, companies like N26 or Revolut that are jumping over from the UK, and organizations that started right here, like Chime in San Francisco. So Chime is signing up 150,000 new primary checking accounts a month. Just let that sink in. 150,000 new primary checking accounts a month. That's quite a lot. That's more than Wells Fargo is currently signing up. Now, at the same time, you have the mega banks. The mega banks are pushing down. They're also sucking up deposits. You're probably aware of this already, but there was a restriction that was just lifted off of JP Morgan Chase that now allows them to open up 400 new prime location branches throughout the United States. And each of those 400 branches is going to suck about $100 million of deposits around the surrounding ecosystem. So it's more important than ever to figure out, how can you compete in these increasingly crowded environment, and being able to take your data and generate insights is a huge component of that. I don't have to tell you of why deposits in particular are so important. Obviously, for a financial institution, there's been three ways that you can historically generate income. You have the delta on your interest rates, you have fees, and you have interchange. And it's very difficult to continue to get more and more revenue from fees and interchange, particularly if you're a larger organization over the $10 billion mark from a regulatory standpoint. And if you're not that big, even from a competitive standpoint, nobody wants to be the checking account that has fees anymore. So the only way out of this death spiral is ultimately to loan more, and we all need more deposits to loan more. So going to, well, how exactly do you do this, Brian? So you're telling me that you can take my anonymous transaction data and turn it into a social graph, kind of what Facebook or LinkedIn has. It seems like a bit of a stretch. How exactly is this possible? How does it work? So here's how it works in three steps. So to build a customer graph, that's what we call it, or a member graph, the first step is to figure out how people are connected to each other. So the way that this was originally developed is called using an explicit and implicit graph that uses massive parallel analysis of transactions over time to model the spread of information across customers. So that's a mouthful, but I'll tell you where it came from. So do you remember back in, I think it was around 2003, the SARS epidemic that came out and hit a lot of Asian cities like Hong Kong? So during that period of time, obviously the people that study how viruses spread, epidemiologists, had a big problem, which is they needed to understand when does an infection get to the point where it's a national health concern, something that's going to turn into an epidemic or a pandemic, so they can start, telling people you can't travel, you have to check into the hospital. Now, no one wants to tell people that they can't travel unless they have to. So being able to understand when something is about to get very serious is obviously important. And these epidemiologists, the people that study how viruses spread, knew that if they had access to a social graph, that would be very useful in determining when something's going to get out of control. The problem is that just like most financial institutions, these epidemiologists didn't have access to Facebook's data or LinkedIn's data, right? They didn't have social graph data, but they wanted it. And so they were very, very smart, and they developed a technique to determine how people were connected just by using the transaction data they already had. Now, the transaction data that the epidemiologists had are a little bit different than the transaction data a credit union would have. Their data is hospital check-in timestamps. That's their type of transaction data. So a hospital check-in timestamp would look like this. It would say, okay, person A checked into a hospital at this time with this virus and they were this sick. And so what we did at Alpharank is we said, that transaction data is awfully similar to what we have in the banking space, which is who is it, where did they go, when did they go there, and how much did they spend? And so we were able to apply that methodology to how the epidemiologists figured out how people were connected. And here's how the epidemiologists did it. And so they said basically, look, if 1 year you get sick and check into the hospital with virus 1, and then all your friends check into the hospital with virus 1 after you, and then the next year you get sick with virus 2, check into the hospital, and then all your friends get sick and check into the hospital with virus 2. And then the next year you get sick and check into the hospital with virus 3. And then all your friends check into the hospital with virus 3. Eventually we're going to go, look, we don't know what you and your friends are doing, but it's very likely that you are connected, or at least part of the same community. You exist in a part of the same network. You have some common friends in common. And so what we did is we took that approach and we applied it to banking data. So it's if you go to a merchant, and then all your friends go to that merchant, and then the next year you go to that merchant, and then all your friends go to the merchant, and that pattern continues. Eventually, we're able to say, hey, these people are likely connected to each other. So there's 3 parts to doing this in practice. The first part is obviously cleaning the data. So you got to get data from your card processor and your core processor and merge it together. So that's typically going to be debit card data or credit card data if you have high credit card volume, and then rolling balance information and ACH data. So you merge it together, and then you have to assign each individual merchant a category that's very clean. So what you need to do this is squeaky clean data, because it doesn't matter that someone went to McDonald's, but what you really want is that this person went to this McDonald's on this specific point in space in time. So squeaky clean data is the first step, and then after you have squeaky clean data, you can run the algorithm and figure out how people are connected to each other and who went somewhere and then what other people followed them. After you have the graph, though, you want to enrich it and figure out, okay, going back to that term homophily, or birds of a feather flock together, why are these people flocking together? What commonalities do they have? And so what we look for at Alpharank are communities of interconnected people. That allows us to see what do these people who are connected have in common. And potentially maybe we could leverage that information to find more people that are similar to them but are not yet members. And so what we do is we enrich the graph with behavioral attributes extracted from the transaction data. So you can see here there's a couple of them: thrifty eater, outdoor lover, the parent of a school child, and someone who's a liquor drinker. So all of these attributes are extracted from the transaction data, because after we've made squeaky clean data, we know that this person, for example, goes to a liquor store regularly. And then we enrich that back into the graph, and we try to figure out what makes these particular communities of people unique to each other. So that is how you take the transaction data you have and turn it into an understanding of how all of your members are connected. But the next question is, well, okay, this seems very interesting, and I get how you do it, but it's rather academic. How is it actually used for a credit union like myself, and how does it work when implemented? And the answer there is it works great. So it's been used to increase increase auto loan conversion substantially for credit unions, being able to say How do we identify who else would likely be a good target to have them take an auto loan project from us? And this is based on the methodology of, it turns out that if I'm connected to you and you already have an auto loan, it makes me much more likely to also take out an auto loan from your organization. It works great for savings accounts. We've been able to increase 12x the performance of a saving product for another credit union by, again, targeting people that are connected to other people that already have the savings account. There is a willingness to sign up for something if your friend has already signed up for something. Just like what we saw in the bank run example is that people were much more likely to withdraw their money from the bank if they were connected to someone who'd already withdrawn their money from the bank. It works great for tracking how new products spread through an organization. We have, for some of the largest banks in the world, tracked how Venmo infects and spreads through their networks, because particularly large banks are concerned about Venmo taking market share from something that they want to spread, like Zelle. And I can send this presentation out if you send me an email, so you can dive deeper into all these case studies. And then finally, what I want to focus on in this webinar is something near and dear to all of our hearts right now, which is new household acquisition, particularly new deposit acquisition. And so what we're able to do is, again, using that terminology of networks called homophily, or birds of a feather flock together, we were able to take an organization's transaction data, graph how all of their customers were connected to each other, and then train the model on who is going to deposit the most money. So going after people that kind of look or are similar to our current members and finding more people like them externally. And what we were able to do is drive a 38% lift in conversions through an online account opening process. And so this involves taking core transaction data, targeting your digital ads based on what your data says, and then measuring people as they go through the online account opening process, and then repeating the process all over again. And so this is what I'm going to spend the remainder of our time on today, is showing you how you can take the data you have and use it to acquire more net new members with a focus on acquiring more net new deposits. But first, I want to introduce a concept to you called a core growth platform. So let's go back to Chime. How the heck is Chime adding 150,000 new primary checking accounts a month? Well, one of the things that Chime built that is uncommon in the traditional banking space is they built a core growth platform internally. So a lot of these fintech challengers out there, and I'm based in San Francisco, so I'm friends with some of the people that run them, and we run in the same circles, but they're essentially growth shops. So these large venture capitalists have given a sizable amount of money to these organizations. Chime, for example, was just valued in the most recent funding round at over $1 billion. They launched 3 years ago. Nuts, right? And so what these VCs are giving money to these organizations to is they're basically saying, look, we think that you can out-acquire the incumbent financial institutions out there. And because these are growth hackers, these are people whose only job is to grow large organizations and acquire lots of customers. They have a huge advantage, and the foundation of that advantage is what's called a core growth platform. So a core growth platform is something that you can build internally. You can buy it from a vendor like Alpharank, but you need one. And if you take one thing away from this presentation, other than graphs are cool, perhaps more important is you need a efficient and well-functioning core growth platform to be able to survive in the future. So what is a core growth platform? A core growth platform is the tying together of 3 separate systems that you have in your organization. So you have your core data, obviously, and you have wherever your marketing team is placing your ads on digital channels. So core data, this is going to be the usual suspects: FIS, Fiserv, Jack Henry, CSI. You have your digital ad space. This is typically right now, the 2 largest are going to be the Google ad ecosystem, the Facebook and Instagram ad ecosystem. And then you have your online account opening solutions. So online account opening solutions, this could be probably for most of you, it's going to be Meridian Link. You also have Grow, which was just bought by Q2. You have Bolts, which was just bought by Jack Henry. You have Zenmonix, which was just bought by FIS. And I think you have Monitor, which is bought by Finastra, but your online account opening solutions. So what a core growth platform is it ties together these 3 separate systems, and it makes sure that they're all passing information to each other in an efficient way, measuring how you're performing, and then ideally optimizing it over time. So how a core growth platform works is you take your core transaction data and you do analytics on it. Alpharank does graph analytics, but there's other analytics you can do. And then you predict who you should go after. So take your core transaction data, see what your current members are doing, and find more people that are going to likely resonate with your brand. And then you place your ads on the digital media site. So you say, okay, we're going to place a bunch of ads on Facebook, we're going to place a bunch of ads on Instagram, and then those ads, when clicked on, are going to drive people to the online account opening process. So driving people to the online account opening process so that when they click the ad, they go to the site, and then they're able to click, create an account, and then as they create the account, you then measure their usage. So you want to measure their usage after you've paid, $300 to acquire someone and get them to go to an online account opening tool. You then want to measure the usage. How much are they depositing money? How much are they using their card? And so that allows you to predict where you should place the ads, drive people through the online account opening process, and then measure and repeat the whole process again. If you do not have these three systems working together, you are essentially throwing your money away, because you can't accurately say for every $100,000 you spend on new or digital media, what are you getting for that? And you're also crippling your ability to grow. Because in the future, if Instagram 2 comes out or a new digital channel, and you don't have a system set up to quickly test and learn if it's going to work or if it's going to be viable for your organization, you're crippling your growth. And let's be real, you're either going to, if you're comfortable with just existing in today's environment, you will not exist independently for long. Someone will buy you. At Alpharank, we believe in having a diverse and healthy banking system, so that's not something we're a fan of, and I would not encourage any of you to let this sit. If your core growth platform is not set up and working efficiently, you need to fix it, period. End of story, next issue. So what I'm going to do is show you what a core growth platform looks like. I'm going to show you what Alpharank's platform looks like, but again, you can build this internally, you can buy it from Alpharank, but the takeaway here is that you need it. So let's jump in. This is what Alpharank's core growth platform looks like. It's called Human, and we call it Human because it replaces some of the human issues that marketing departments have. Marketing departments, they don't often run enough tests, they don't often run enough campaigns because it's hard, and you constantly have to be tweaking these organizations and making improvements. So what we do at Alpharank is we take your core transaction data, and we take your card transaction data, and we merge it together. And we do this, and on the back end, we create a customer graph. That's why you're seeing the amount of connected customers here. There's about 25,000. You see there's 86 communities. We've looked at the customers. We said, oh, how are they clustered in communities? And there's 10 geographic markets that this organization is operating in. This is real data. And if you look at the new trends, Alpharank is constantly scanning the customer graph and trying to identify new opportunities for growth. So if you imagine your network like a big blob in front of you, you have to figure out which direction do you want to grow it. Do you want to grow it right? Do you want to grow it left? Do you want to grow it up? Do you want to grow it down? And so what we're doing is we're looking at the edges of your network, and we're seeing how can we expand out? How can we find new market share? And we're constantly testing, is it right? Is it left? Is it up? Is it down? To figure out where is that new growth going to come from. So this is what we call trends. So this trend in particular is going to be in the Greenville market, and I'm going to open it up and show you what goes into it and how this is actually implemented at an institution. So what you see here is a group of numbers connected to each other. So this represents the network, and this particular community, it's quite large. There's about 5,000 individual customers. The behavior, right, think about birds of a feather flock together. What makes these 5,000 people unique is that they're PTA parents. The product that we recommend based on what these 5,000 people are doing that you offer to new people who are not yet members is rewards checking. And we're also recommending, based on the transaction data we've seen, that you're going to find more people that are similar to these 5,000 existing members on Facebook. So if we scroll down, you're going to see a customer ID here. This is going to be a member ID for credit unions. What this means is that one of the things that makes Alpharank unique is that we only use non-PII transaction data. So non-personally identifiable transaction data. This is better for you because you don't have to share member information. It's better for us, but that's how we work at Alpharank. So if and I am a member of a credit union, if it's Brian Ley to you, all it means is customer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to us. And if you're not familiar using a member ID, we can help you set that up. and export it. You also notice there's all of these attributes. You have PTA parent, PTA parent, PTA parent, online shopper, phone owner, etc. So some of these attributes are easier, but they're all extracted from the transaction data. So phone owner, that's a pretty easy attribute. You can just see as someone making phone payments on their card or through ACH. PTA parent's a little bit more difficult. So PTA parent, we look for transactions or donations in the transaction stream. Now, it doesn't mean that we always get it right. There is a chance that some kid went around and did a fundraiser in their neighborhood, and we may have mistagged certain individuals. But if you're familiar with how the law of large numbers work and statistics, as you get more and more to 5,000, it becomes a very accurate representation of really what makes this group of 5,000 people, unique or in common. Remember, birds of a feather flock together. So if we look through, we see PTA parent, gamer, based on just anecdotal experience. What these probably are, these are probably parents whose kids are using their debit cards to buy Fortnite skins or App Store purchases or whatever kids are into these days. Now, next, you're going to take, those were your current members, and we're going to go find more people that are similar to them, birds of a feather flock together, externally. So you set your budget, you set your channel, and then you're ready to select your creative. Now, if you have a more sophisticated content management system set up, Alpharank can work with that, but what we've done is we've baked it in because we think it's really important to have a single place that you can run your entire growth stack or your core growth platform. So you select your text, you select your images, and then you drop people on something that leads to an online account opening page. So in this case, it's going to be humanbank.com/sign-up-offer-2. So we have our text, we have our creative, and we're going to launch the campaign. Now, Alpharank works in two ways. Personally, you can put in your text and your creative, or Alpharank does it for you. So we have a service called Autopilot where we will do this and test and create the content, create the creative, and run the entire thing for you. It just depends how busy your marketing team is and if they have bandwidth to do this themselves. Now, the next step is to review and launch the campaign. So I'm going to title this PTA, and then you can see what are your ads going to look like when rendered on the sites and review it. At every step on the way, you can review and make sense and make sure that this makes sense for your unique education. And it's time to schedule a campaign. So as cool as this was, and I'm sure you think as me, it is cool, it's not the coolest part about Alpharank. The coolest part about Alpharank is this boring page right here. Right now, I know it doesn't look like much, but if you pay a little bit more attention, you'll notice that this is the most important part of the whole system. It's the measurement part, because you cannot optimize a system you can't efficiently measure. And so you can see that because a core growth platform, remember core transaction data, digital ads, and then the online account opening process back to the core transaction data, it allows you to show for every dollar you spent on Facebook, how much did you actually drive in deposits, and what did it cost to acquire those deposits? So here you can see we spent about $135,000, and it drove about $1.5 million of deposits, and it cost us this much per dollar to go get those new deposits. And you can watch beyond this even further and see how do these people perform 30 days post, 90 days post. But this is the critical missing piece. If your organization does not have it, if it can't tell you for every dollar spent on new media, what does it cost? You're crippling your growth. You don't want to do that, because it's really important to shift as many dollars as you can efficiently from old media. Old media is magazines, TV, the sides of the buses, to new media. New media is Facebook, Google, Instagram. That shift is important because on old media, people can't click an ad and then go straight to your online account opening process. So there's no way to really optimize old media efficiently. That's a big problem. And that's the difference between Chime, that went from spending $1 million on new media one quarter to $10 million the next, is that they were able to increase that spend because there was no risk. They knew what they were going to be getting. And it's really important to have these measurement systems set up, because one of your advantages as an incumbent financial institution is you don't live or die on a quarter-to-quarter basis, hopefully. But many of these startups that you're competing against do, meaning they have to hit specific growth goals every quarter to be able to raise their next tranche of funding. And so they're constantly pushing every single quarter for growth. Now, what that means is that when you're buying ads in a marketplace. So other people that are coming in affect what you're going to be acquiring, what your cost is, say your cost per click. So if you have a Finn or a Marcus that comes into one of your geographies and ramps up advertising, that's going to increase your cost to acquire. And something that might be smarter than rather trying to compete with them directly, don't. Take a break. Take a pause. You don't need to constantly be advertising. Only advertise when it makes sense. And so the only way to make sure if it makes sense is to constantly test and figure out what part of your network does it make sense to expand and win. And so in a nutshell, that's what we do at Alpharank. It's a core growth platform. We call it Human, and it takes your core transaction data and intelligently places ads, and then measures how people convert through the online account opening process. And the result of this is me saying, hey, look, how many new members are you acquiring each month? Maybe it's 200. And I'd say, okay, well, how many of those are you acquiring through your online account opening process? Maybe it's 50. And I would say, okay, well, how many more members do you want to hit your growth goals? Maybe you want 200 more. This is how you do it. This is how you get it. And that's it. So I now want to spend the remainder of our time together to take questions, and I'm happy to dive into any part that interested you a little bit deeper.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, I had a couple of questions that already had come through. When you're working with credit unions, what are the practical considerations to get started on this kind of analysis?
When you say practical considerations, can you re-articulate that?
Well, I'll have to interpret the question. So I think what the meaning would be is that when you are working with credit unions, what are some of the that they need to consider providing, for instance, gathering data and the kind of things that you would need to help them do the analysis?
Yeah. So one of the things they need is they need to be able to export a report to us that includes the transaction data, something that historically for our clients that use OnApproach has been rather trivial, not terribly difficult. I think for one of our clients, they said it took them around 5 minutes with OnApproach's data lake. So what's going to go into that is at least debit card data. If your debit card volume is substantially bigger than credit, we don't need it to get started, but you definitely need debit card data. You definitely need rolling balances, and then ACH transactions are also good. So the debit card data and the ACH balances go into figuring out the graph, and then the rolling balances go into obviously measuring the deposit performance. So I'll give an example. Say that you have two people who you're going after, people that like the color red and people that like the color blue. And people that like the color red are cheaper to acquire, but they deposit less money. But people that like the color blue are more expensive to acquire, but they deposit more money. So if you're not collecting rolling balance information, you can't associate that particular ad you place is actually driving more deposits, and that's why we need rolling balances in addition. Jim just said, who would you consider to be competitors to Alpharank? Great question. So in the core growth platform space, we are the first company to come out. I don't think that we will probably be the last. So as a core growth platform, Alpharank is the first in the market. But there's other solutions. One was you could build this internally. So you can build a core growth platform internally. And some larger organizations have. It's more common over $20 billion in assets or for fintechs to see it. But no direct competitors in the graph space. That's something very unique to us. But in the core growth platform space, you'll probably see some additional entrants in the next couple of years. Great question, Jim.
One of the things I think about sometimes is that credit unions, when they're dealing with a new technology like this, they look for ways that they can get educated about the subject, things that they can do to kind of prepare themselves for this discussion, because there's the internal selling, I think, in organizations sometimes, and the more knowledge you have, the better. How would you coach credit unions to learn more about this and to get smarter on this so they can make a really good case inside the credit union?
Yeah, so we have a ton of material on this. If you email me, belay@alpharank.io, I'm happy to send over some case studies and even some videos of me explaining the concept. And it's like a short format. It's about 5 minutes, and we're happy to kind of send those materials. Also, if you want to have a conversation that's very similar to this presentation, one-on-one, and then really ask specific technical questions that might have to do with, what online account opening provider are you using, what core are you using, and kind of what's the viability of doing this with your personal mix. We're happy to have those conversations. Meridian Link works great. We also find that if you're running Scimitar with Jack Henry, that's a really easy stack. But everybody has different things that they're using, and we can give specific answers to that. So definitely reach out if you want, just some videos and some generic materials, or if you want to have, a quick 10, 15-minute call and say, hey, this is what I'm using. What do you think the success we could see from it is? We can do kind of one-on-one consultations as well. Oh, yes, another question.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug. Are you currently working with Meridian Link? Yes, we are currently working with Meridian Link. It works great with Meridian Link. Meridian Link is owned by a private equity fund very close to us in San Francisco called Thoma Bravo, and they've recently been consolidating it, and it's one of the easier solutions to work with. All right, Courtney. Thank you for the question. The question was, what does the pricing model look like? That is an awesome question. The pricing is based on asset size, and so we have a matrix that we can walk you through. So it's not based on volume. We're going to do all of your transaction data. The more transaction data you can give us, the better. But it is going to be based on asset size. So smaller asset sizes, smaller price tag, larger asset sizes, larger price tag due to the complexity. Another question. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Mary. Are you currently working with L360? Yes. Yes, we are. Great question. And thank you, everybody, for asking questions. That is awesome. 4 questions in a webinar. Like a new engagement record. So feel free, if you have weird questions on graph stuff, if you have generic questions on marketing stuff, it doesn't have to have anything to do with Alpharank. I'm here to add value.
Okay.
Yeah, John, thank you. John, is the credit union responsible for cleaning the transaction data from tagging, or is that done by Alpharank? That is an awesome question, John. No, that is that janitorial work is all Alpharank. If you get it to us, we will clean it. We will make it squeaky clean, and then we will set you up with that core growth platform. You can start learning and making sure that your marketing is actually working, and if it's not, fixing it, optimizing it, and then improving it and positioning yourself for future success. Thank you for that question, John.
All right. I want to thank you, Brian. Thanks again for your information today. And thanks for everyone for participating in today's presentation. And look forward to other CU App Store Presents webinars and podcasts in the future. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Take care. Cheers.